Hello and welcome back to State of the Division, this time with UFC 299. Only one more to go before the big 300. And besides the rush quality of this script, because I thought it was happening on the 16th and not the 9th, this card is stacked. You have a lot of fights with contenders, a lot of fights with challengers, and it's a lot of establishing where people are in the rankings. We have a few exciting new prospects coming in. Michael Venom Paige will make his UFC debut, which is big. Not sure how that fight will go, but we'll see. But overall, you're looking at a card that's really big, and honestly, this is almost better than the UFC 300 card in my. The title fight will be interesting. The O'Malley Vera matchup will be fun. I personally think this will be a very different fight from the first one. Although before we get too far into that, let's go ahead and do some housekeeping on the Butcher's Bill. Now, housekeeping first. As you can see, my new record is 15-9-1, and I went 8-4-1 on the last card. That one, if you are wondering, comes from Rogerio de Lima versus Junior Tafa, originally fighting Justin Tafa. I technically got the fight right, picking de Lima to win, but I wouldn't have counted it against me if he had lost. So to keep it fair in my own rules, I counted it as nothing, putting the one there. Nothing much else for housekeeping. Moving into the Butcher's Bill, we only have two fighters on it so far. Lauren Murphy and Karine Silva. Both fighters are off the card and not fighting at all. That brings an end to it, so let's jump right in. Kicking off 299 and our early prelims. 16-8, Joanne Jojo Wood looks for 2 in a row against 11-5, Mariana, Iron Lady Moraes. Moraes is 6 years younger at 32, 1 inch taller, with 2 in reach, also going her way. Wood has been on a cold streak as of late, but is coming off a split decision win over Luana, Carolina. Stylistically, she's a bit of a grinder. Last finish was in 2018, who is decent in multiple parts of the game with a 6.39 to 4.72 in striking and a 1.57 takedown average. Now, in her win, she takes the striking lead by a fair margin, leading by 31, 71, and 50 in her last 3 wins, and limits her opponents by landing takedowns, though I have to say that her control time is inconsistent, with her opponents gaining more time off fewer takedowns. She does seem to struggle against fighters who start quick, with 2 of her last 3 losses coming in the first by submission, Talia Santos and Alexa Grasso respectively. So there is some dependency on being in the driver's seat and not wanting to play off the back foot. Now, Moraes is on a 2-fight losing streak and also comes across as a grinder, though a bit of a different flavor. She carries a 4.15 to 4.42 in striking and doesn't really have any KO power, so as a result, most of her wins have these very close striking totals where the deciding factor seems to be her ability to land takedowns and rack up chunks of control time. However, in takedowns, she only carries a 0.67 with only a 45% takedown defense. So other fighters have been able to defend her takedowns and in response, take her down and take those chunks of control time for themselves. Vegas runs with Moraes by a decent margin, and quite frankly, I will agree. Yes, she has lost 2, but I feel as this Moraes is going to be able to keep Wood in her sights, not going to let Wood get away and take control as Wood likes to do. I think Moraes will not let Wood build that striking lead that she likes, and in terms of takedowns, both fighters are similar, and while Wood does have the advantage, I think Moraes can match or at least mitigate the other parts of her game and keep the fight more in her ballpark. Quite frankly, Wood can win this fight. I'm just giving the edge to Moraes based A, on Vegas, and B, her striking is a little better, and while she's been beat on the ground, I think Wood and her are very similar in terms of the ground game. 12-4-1, CJ Varara looks to keep winning at 18-2. I'm so sorry. Asu Zulfikar Almeida in his second UFC fight. Almeida is 2 years younger, but surrenders 2 inches in height and 3 in reach. Now, Vergara is a striking-focused fighter with a definite KO touch, but doesn't necessarily require that to win. In the numbers, he rocks a 6.01 to 5.01 in striking, and in his career carries 7 KO wins, 2 of those in the UFC. I am also willing to say that he is a very dynamic striker, with his striking mixing in elbows and knees, forcing the opponent to recognize the multitude of places the strike could be coming from. In terms of takedowns, he doesn't really with a 0.0, but a solid takedown defense at 74%. On a side note, he also seems to be able to throw submissions, but hasn't landed any in his career, meaning he's certainly thrown them, attempted to land them, just hasn't succeeded. It might be something worth noting for this fight, I'm not quite sure. Now, Almeida comes into this off a submission win over Ode Osborne, where he outstruck him 26-4, landed 2 takedowns, and secured 5.24 of control time. Now, outside the UFC, he runs with 3 KO, 9 submission, and 6 decision wins, so the obvious preference for the ground game is there. I don't know how fully he handles himself on the feet, but I imagine there's at least some degree of defense or avoidability there, given his record and the fight with Oz. Vegas has picked Almeida. to win, and quite frankly, I'm inclined to agree. I don't think Vergara is bad, but you have Vergara who, while he has a 74% takedown defense, struggles with the ground, versus a guy who's heavy into the ground. And I always tend to have a bias for that ground-focused fighter with a few exceptions. And this fight's not one of those exceptions. I think Vergara is going to face a fair number of takedowns, and one takedown puts him in the danger zone of getting submitted. And I don't know if he has a good enough ground game to counter or turn it back on Almeida. So in the end, I'm going to run with Almeida here based off his more aggressive ground game, successful takedowns, and generally that grinding style where he tends to avoid taking a lot of damage, it seems. UFC newcomer and apparent Olympic Taekwondo medalist, 4-0-0, Robelis, the big boy, Despain, takes on 15-7 Josh Perisian. Now, Perisian is 1 year younger, but Despain is 3 inches taller at 6'7", with no idea in reach, but I can say that Perisian has a 79-inch reach. Now, I don't got a whole lot on Despain. I saw the Olympic Taekwondo thing on a YouTube video and I was trying to find highlights for him. And I mean, the man only has 4 professional fights. I can say the man has KO power, with each of his wins coming by KO, but not to be a pessimist, even though I am, only one of those wins comes over somebody who has actually won a fight. So of his 4 UFC fights, only one fighter had a win on their record when I clicked on them in Sherdog writing this script. I'm not going to hold that against him. You can only fight who you can find. But Perisian has been in the UFC for 6 fights and 2 Contender Series fights. In the numbers, he runs with a 4.54 to 4.81 in striking, which does speak to the typical heavyweight swang and bang mentality. He can shoot takedowns and occasionally does to great effect with a .99 average. Now, he does only have a 46% takedown defense, and other heavyweights have taken him down heavily and controlled throughout the fight. Vegas likes Despain here, and I'm going to disagree. It might be a poor decision, but the dude only has 4 professional fights, and while he looks like a striking machine, Perisian's been in the UFC a little bit longer. He's faced good strikers, and I think his ability to even shoot a little takedown might be something Despain has issues with in the octagon. Can Despain win? It's a heavyweight fight. If you can throw a heavy punch, you'll always have a chance to win, and Despain definitely can throw power. I'm going to pick Perisian. I might regret picking Perisian, but in this case, I'm going to run with him given his UFC experience. 29-11-0-2. Michael Demolidor Pereira looks to keep the winning streak alive against 19-6-0-1. Michael Husar Oleksiuzik. I'm so sorry. Oleksiuzik is 1 year younger at 29, does surrender 1 inch in height to Pereira, but 1 inch in reach does head back his way. Pereira is a very explosive fighter, with the ability to knock you out or choke you out. In striking, he runs with a 5.09 to 3.74, and as I mentioned, he has the KO touch with 11 career KO wins. Fairly dynamic striker, packs a lot of explosive power that he can draw on. He does tend to take a hefty striking lead, but on the occasions where the gap is close, he handles himself fine and is able to keep the pressure up. Backing up that striking is his takedown game, which sits at a 1.56 average. Now, the frequency of takedowns varies on the fight, which makes me think it's based on a game plan, but his submission game helps make it dangerous anytime he pulls it. Oleksiuzik, besides having a name I can't pronounce, is also a striker with a dangerous KO touch, carrying 14 in his career and 6 in the UFC. Numbers-wise, he rocks a 5.12 to 4.17 in striking and is very good at keeping the fight in his wheelhouse. With that I mean he doesn't often let the fight get out of his grasp and keeps the win in sight. He does have a .76 takedown average, but once again I feel that those are situational and game plan versus a consistent thought in his mind. He does only have a 48% takedown defense, but he has mitigated most of the damage with those takedowns. Vegas takes Pereira, and I will agree. It's nothing against Oleksiuzik, or however you say his name, but I think when both fighters have similar striking styles, both are able to finish on the feet and put the fight away, it comes down to what the difference is. And here I think the difference is his ground game. I think his 48% takedown defense opens it up for Pereira to take him down and put him on the ground. Whether it's a submission or control time, I think that just tilts the needle ever so much in Pereira's favor. Now, I think Oleksiuzik has a path, but I think that path is more difficult for him to keep because he wants to keep it on the feet against the cage. He wants to prevent it going for the ground and letting Pereira work ground control time, work submission threats. I think that's more difficult for him to do in this fight than it would be for Pereira to get to the ground or force him to watch the ground and get more open to strikes. Ending off the early prelims. 17-9-1-1. Ion the Hulk Calaba looks for 2 in a row against 17-5 Felipe Monstro Lins. Calaba is 8 years younger at 30, with either 1 inch or none in height going to Lins, but a definite 3 going his way. Calaba is a takedown-heavy fighter that does pack a hefty KO. Numbers-wise, he rocks a 4.53 to 3.29 in striking, relying on that power to serve as the equalizer in addition to backing up that striking with a 4.75 takedown average. Those takedowns serve to both rack up ground control time, but also disrupt his opponent's offense, letting him take the striking lead. It is worth noting that some fighters are able to either neutralize his takedowns or survive them and take control of the fight away from him. In those situations, we see him lose more fights despite leading in takedowns and strikes in some cases. Lins is still relatively new to the UFC with 5 fights and 3 wins. He's a little similar to Calaba with a 3.59 to 3.73 in striking, backed up with a 1.55 takedown average. Now, he doesn't always need the takedown to win the fight, as with some fights he has stayed standing on toe-to-toe in order to win. But as a whole, he tends to go to the ground to secure large chunks of control time while just keeping it close on the feet. Vegas takes Calaba, and by a narrow margin, I will agree. I feel both fighters are similar, but Calaba edges him out slightly in a few aspects. It's nothing major, and I won't be surprised if Lins wins this fight. But looking at those small differences, looking at the slightly higher striking total, looking at the looking at the very much higher takedown average, those tilt the needle in Calaba's favor for me. Could Lins turn it against him and win? We've seen it happen before. We've seen fighters match Calaba. But I just feel like in this fight, Lins is fighting someone who's just a little better than him in both facets of the game. And I think that's going to work against him and give the win to Calaba. Kicking off the prelims. 28-0-2. Pedro, the young Punisher Munoz, looks for the quick rebound against 11-2 Kyler Matrix Phillips. Despite the name, Munoz is 9 years older at 37, with Phillips also being 2 inches taller, with a 7-inch reach advantage also going his way. Munoz is a slugger, rocking with a 5.45 to 6.14 in striking and monstrous toughness to wade through shots and keep going. Obviously not the most technical striker, relatively speaking, but he is constantly applying pressure and going after his opponents. In his wins, he does tend to take the striking lead, but sometimes has gotten the win off damage dealt over quantity. He does have a 0.47 takedown average, but it's very inconsistent with landing them and securing control time off them. Phillips is a finisher on both the feet and the ground, with 1 submission win and 2 KO wins in the UFC. Numbers-wise, he runs with a 5.36 to 3.36 in striking, and as mentioned, does have KO power lurking in the wing. Worth noting is that he doesn't tend to get the finish in the first, going into the second with 2 of his 3 finished wins. When it comes to takedowns, he rocks with a 2.87 average, and it has been a consistent presence in almost every one of his UFC fights. Doesn't rack up incredibly large chunks of control time, but uses them as disruptions and to limit his opponent's offense. Vegas picks Kyler Phillips by a decent margin. Quite frankly, I will agree with a heavy question mark there. The main question being is that I don't know if Phillips will be able to put Munoz away, which lets Munoz hang around and constantly work his high pressure, high octane, walking you backwards, hitting you hard, and that can give him the win by decision or even land the shot to put Phillips away. However, at the same time, hanging around gives Phillips more chances to put him away. And so with the fight likely going into multiple rounds, that tilts an arrow in Phillips' favor for either just winning more rounds or getting more shots that can put Munoz away. It's a close fight in my mind, and I think I'm going to go with Phillips in the end, but I think Munoz has a better shot than Vegas is giving him here. 23-2-0-1, Mateus Gamr looks for the win over 32-15 Rafael Dos Anjos. Gamrot is 6 years younger at 33, 2 inches taller, with dead even reach across the board. Gamrot is a finisher, with 4 of his 7 UFC wins not making it the distance. And he's able to do it on both the feet and the ground. In striking, he carries a 2.97 to 3.17, and really lets the power serve as an equalizer. Backing it all up is a 4.36 takedown average that he uses to great effect in both generating control time, but also limiting what his opponent is able to do on offense. He does also have a submission game with 5 career submissions, but he only has 1 submission win in the UFC. Dos Anjos is a little harder to get a read on, but I'd call him a grinder since of his last 4 wins, 2 of them are decisions. In striking, he runs with a 3.52 to 3.19, which highlights the grinding style he has where he gives and gets on the feet throughout a bout. He has been able to take the lead in some fights, but with the striking lead comes his takedown game backing it up. On that note, he carries a 2.01 takedown average, and in almost every fight since January 2020, he has landed a takedown. That does bring up his submission threat and ability to control lesser fighters on the ground or secure the submission. He does seem able to play off his back, but does prefer to lead the action on the ground. Vegas likes Gamrot by a good margin, and I will agree. I think Dos Anjos has a path to win, but I think his path is longer and a little more difficult than Gamrot's. Gamrot has to fight a Gamrot fight. Dos Anjos has to beat Gamrot, and I think in every aspect, because Gamrot's good on the ground, good enough, I think, to match Dos Anjos. So Dos Anjos has to pass him on the ground if he goes there. On the feet, I definitely give the edge to Gamrot. And I think that's where it gets difficult, because Gamrot, again, moves the needle, has the needle tipping more his direction in multiple categories than I think Dos Anjos does at this moment. 18-5, Caitlin, blonde fighter Criminara, formerly Juka Game, steps in against 13-2, Macy, the future, Barber. Barber is 10 years younger, 4 inches shorter, with only 3 in reach going to Seminara. Seminara is a grinder through and through. She carries a 4.59 to 4.41 in striking, which does highlight that style. She's very good at taking the striking lead and holding on to it throughout a fight, never really letting her opponents get too much traction going. Not to mention that she has proven to be able to defend opponents' takedowns and get off the ground in order to get back to the feet. Turns the takedown, she does have a .27, and it gets used very sparingly, which does lead me to believe it's a situational or a consistent game plan tactic. Barber is also a bit of a grinder, but definitely pulls more on the ground game to control her opponents. On that note, she rolls with a 1.14 takedown average and the consistent presence of takedowns in her fights. Her striking game is also very good, sitting at a 4.60 to 2.72 with the ability to put people away. Barber's the favorite, and being boring, I'm going to agree. Seminara is not bad, but once again, we're looking at the fight where Barber in every measurable category is definitely better. Barber's tendency to control the action on the ground and with the power to put people away and the ability to definitely lead in the striking puts the action against Seminara, Chukagame, whatever, puts the action against her to match or stay with, and in those aspects she puts herself in danger, which makes me give the edge to Barber. Taking us out of the prelims, we go to the heavyweights. 17-4-0-1. Curtis, Razor Blades, with the best ring name, looks to rebound against the rising 20-2. Jalton Maldahino Almeida. Almeida is 1 year younger at 32, either no difference in height or 1 inch going to Blades, with a definite 1 inch reach going to Blades. Now Blades, as I said, having the best last name, is a well-rounded fighter who packs the traditional heavyweight punch. On the feet, he rocks a 3.56 to 1.89, plus the aforementioned heavyweight power. One interesting note with Blades striking is that he doesn't really tend to have the massive striking totals, keeping the total strikes down by either ending it or slowing the fight down with takedowns. On that note, he has a 5.93 takedown average and uses them very well when he shoots them, getting several minutes of ground control off of them. It is worth noting that he doesn't always shoot takedowns, and that total is slightly inflated by a heavy takedown fight against Volkov. Now, Almeida has been on a hot streak, making use of a dangerous takedown and submission game. Numbers-wise, works with a 2.78 to 0.52 in striking, also having the low striking totals similar to Blades with a 5.14 takedown average. Though the takedowns in Almeida's game are much more integral to his style, where he shoots them in every fight he's had in the UFC. His submission game is also very threatening. He's able to control his opponents on the ground very well and capitalize off their attempts to escape or counter his moves. Vegas has Blades by a narrow margin, and all I wrote here was live decision. And I'm gonna go with a gut feeling. I'm gonna pick Almeida. Almeida's on a meteoric rise, and while I don't have much faith in Almeida's striking compared to Blades, I don't feel like this fight has to go to the ground. I feel like Almeida's going to shoot. And while Blades is good on the ground, Almeida's submission game and how he's handled other fighters makes him a very dangerous threat. I think he can survive Blades on the ground if worse comes to worse for him, but if he gets control, I think Blades is put on the back foot, and that can work in a very bad way, giving Almeida the control time or the opportunity to sink a submission in and end the fight. Blades can easily win this fight. I'm hard to deny. He has the knockout power. He has the ability to control you on the ground with takedowns and the ability, I believe, to occasionally submit you, though I don't remember reading that. But I'm going to run with Almeida based on the hot hand he's running with, his style of takedowns, and the fact this fight likely is going to go to the ground. And I think Almeida has a chance to get that necessary takedown and take control, while I think Blades might make a mistake, but might cede the action in one key moment. Starting off the main card, 16-5, Peter No Mercy Yan looks to stop the skid against 21-7-1-1 Song Kung Fu Kid Yadong. Yadong is 5 years younger, 1 inch taller, with no difference in reach. Yan is a slick striker who makes great use of trips and quick takedowns to disrupt his opponent's offense. Just looking at his striking, he's a strong boxer who's able to step in with quick flurries and generate knockdowns. In the numbers, he carries a 5.03 to 4.26, which does speak to that kind of flurry-based style and his toughness getting into that danger zone. Now, with the takedowns, he carries a 1.71 and does have decent success in getting control time, but the results do vary as other fighters are able to shut down that part of his game. He has struggled with heavy control time fighters in the past, looking at you, Aljamain Sterling, in the rematch, but overall seems to be pretty good at staying off the ground. Yadong is also a striker, though he comes across a little different in how he works the fight. He does tend to work with a striking lead as opposed to Yan, and also tends to get the finish more often than Yan. I do feel it's more of a swarming style over power, but either way the numbers are 4.38 to 3.73 in striking that do kind of highlight how he can be caught in exchanges, but is able to power through. Takedowns set as 0.63, but he does tend to land a few of them, but does get longer stretches of control time. Vegas has decided to run with Jan by a narrow margin, and going out on a limb here, I'm gonna disagree. I do think Jan might have the better striking in this fight. I don't even think it's might. I think he does. But I think Yadong's style of takedowns, generating those chunks of control time off fewer takedowns, I think give him the advantage. Because we've seen Jan struggle with those fighters that are able to hold him down and control him. Do I think Yadong can be beaten? Yes. But they have a similar striking style, more based on a lot of contact and landing quick shots to stumble somebody and put them away. And while Jan does those quick takedowns and trips, I think Yadong's longer takedowns, controlling longer on the ground, give him the edge in this fight. It's going to be a close fight, and I can easily see Jan winning. I think he has a clear path to victory, but at the same time, I think Yadong's path is just a little better. 22-6 Gilbert Durhino Burns looks for the rebound win against 16-2 Jack Della Matalena. Matalena is 10 years younger, 1 inch taller, with 2 inches in reach, going his way. Gilbert Burns is Gilbert Burns, and that's about all I need to say. He's a power forward fighter in both his strikes and his takedowns, making use of them to put his opponents on the back foot and giving him the control or opportunity to take the finish. In striking, he carries a 3.36 to 3.34, which speaks to his willingness to exchange and ability to bring power out to match, even if he doesn't get the finish. This is all backed up with a 1.95 takedown average, where he racks up a good chunk of control time off them and forces his opponent to be honest by looking out for them. Matalena is very much a pure striker in comparison, a 7.20 to 4.83 in striking and a very high output where he can tag up his opponents really quick. He can definitely get the finish, but in my opinion, it feels more like timing and quantity versus a straight-up power style. All that being said, he has this very slick style of striking where he's able to work through his opponent's offense and keep himself fairly safe. He can shoot a takedown occasionally, but it's definitely situational versus a consistent element of his game. And in this fight, I don't imagine he wants to go to the ground with Gilbert Burns. Vegas likes Matalena. I will tentatively agree. Matalena's super dangerous on the feet. He's survived the ground a little bit, and I think his striking is definitely better than Burns. But Gilbert Burns, if he gets you to the ground, he can smother and control you. And he can land a knockout shot. He only needs a power shot to put you away. Now, he is significantly older, which is part of the reason I'm going with Matalena, but I can't really count Burns out. I think Matalena has the advantage going in, but he has to play it very smart and not get too greedy with the striking, lest he get caught by a heavy shot and put away. 25-10-0-1. Kevin Trailblazer Holland steps into the octagon against Bellator veteran and debuting UFC fighter, 21-2, Michael Venom Paige. Holland is 5 years younger with either 1 inch in height or dead even across the board, with no comparison for reach, but Holland does have an 81 inch reach. Kevin Holland is a kill or be killed kind of fighter, with all but one of his last 7 fights ending before the final bell. He has a definite preference for striking with a 4.39 to 3.22, and he uses it to generate knockdowns and keep his opponents on the back foot. He does have KO power and is able to get it to show up with relative consistency. That tendency does get him drawn into firefights where he has been caught several times, but also have noted his 0.78 takedown average, and more importantly, his ability to land submissions with general regularity, a 0.5 average, without securing regular takedowns. Once again, he can be matched on the ground and beat there, but as a whole, it adds another wrinkle to his game that people have to watch out for. Paige is a Bellator veteran and former champion with a good deal of experience. He also comes across as a striker with dynamic striking style, working in flying knees, elbows, and more, not to mention his 13 career KO wins and 1 career KO loss, showing his ability to avoid getting caught while stepping in and swinging. Vegas takes Holland by a narrow margin. Quite frankly, I will agree. Paige is 36, and while Holland can get himself caught and with regularity wades into fire, I like his aggressiveness. I think he's going to bring the action, and while I think Paige can win, Paige can land the shot, this is Holland we're talking about, I'm going to go with Vegas. I haven't seen Michael Venom Paige fight a lot, and just watching highlights doesn't tell me a whole lot. I'm going to run with Vegas. I'm going to go with kind of the UFC guy. I'm going to go with Holland. In the second to last event, 29-8-0-1, Dustin the Diamond Poirier squares off against the surging 13-1-0-1 Benoit God of War St Denis. St Denis is 7 years younger, 2 inches taller, as well as a whole inch in reach, rolling his way. Poirier is Poirier, and much like Burns, I feel like that sums it up well. For an actual analysis, stylistically, he's generally a well-rounded fighter with a 5.49 to 4.30 in striking and a 1.36 takedown average. With his striking, he brings a very solid boxing and is capable of matching a lot of fighters on the feet. He does bring some serious power with him and is capable of ending the fight if given the opportunity. In terms of takedowns, he's a solid wrestler who makes good use of takedowns to take control back from his opponents and set up ground and pound. There is some sort of submission game there where he doesn't really need to play off the top and is capable of capitalizing off mistakes or defended takedowns to secure a win. St Denis is a finisher, pure and simple, though there is a definite preference for submissions. In his career, he has 9 total and 2 of those in the UFC. On that note, he carries a 4.55 takedown average, and while he doesn't always need them, they are fairly consistent through thread. With that, the control time is fairly varied, but he's able to consistently generate a few minutes off of his takedowns. With striking, he has a 5.53 to 5.20, and while it isn't a major strength, he's more than able to back up his takedowns, and outside of that, bring out power to put his opponents away. Vegas takes St Denis by a narrow margin, and I will disagree. St Denis is dangerous, undoubtedly. He has the ability to finish you on the feet, the ability to go the ground and submit you. But in this case, some small bias and some part of seeing Poirier fight multiple times, Poirier has matched up with other fighters. Yes, he's been finished by strikers. Yes, he's been submitted by fighters. But with Poirier, we see him a lot of times match fighters for a good while. And I don't know if St Denis has faced somebody like Poirier who's faced some of the hardest in the division. He's faced your Oliveras, he's faced your Gaethjes. And I think Poirier will be able to at least match St Denis and avoid the most dangerous things here to possibly get a win by simply making the distance and getting the points. St Denis definitely could win. I cannot deny that here. If it goes to the ground and he can take control, I think Poirier's in trouble. But at the same time, Poirier can shoot quick takedowns, throw the swading attempts to get him off. And on the feet, I think Poirier's solid enough to match St Denis and minimize the most damage. For the main event, we have a rematch with even higher stakes. 17-1, 0-1. Sugar Sean O'Malley looks for his first title defense against a familiar face. 23-8-1, Marlon Chito Vera. O'Malley is 2 years younger at 29, 3 inches taller, with 2 inches in reach, also going his way. O'Malley is a finisher with a monstrous stand-up game that really puts his reach to work and lets him sit and pick his shots before exploding into a flurry when the chance arises. Numbers-wise, works with a 7.25 to 3.51, which highlights that high output he can pour on. And as I mentioned, he is a finisher, but in my opinion, it's less of a pure power finisher and more like a swarmer who relies on getting that one shot versus any shot possibly being the end shot. A .43 takedown average, but it's a very rare occurrence for him to shoot one. More importantly, he does have a 62% takedown defense and the ability to survive when taken down. Vera is also a striker, but seems to be a bit more of a power-focused fighter, with several fights having him getting the KO while fighting from behind. The numbers show this with a 4.37 to 5.16 in striking, though I do feel he has a fairly dynamic striking style, mixing in kicks with those heavy strikes. He does shoot takedowns with a little more often in comparison, but he still doesn't shoot all that often. So it's more or less another tool in his pocket to possibly call on. Vegas likes O'Malley, and I'm hard-pressed to disagree. I've picked against O'Malley several times on this show. You probably can find them in older videos. But in this fight, Vera's coming in the underdog with good reason. Vera's a power-focused fighter who relies on waiting in to fire to land his shots. When you're waiting in to land a shot, you get open to get hit. And with O'Malley, who lands flurries and dances away, and I'm not going to say plays it safe, but plays it smart, I have to give the edge to O'Malley here. Vera could shoot a takedown and could capitalize off that, but O'Malley is not awful on the ground. He's good at keeping himself alive and defending the worst possible situation. In this fight, O'Malley simply has more check marks by his name. Vera needs to land power. Vera needs to put him away quick and take advantage of the fight quick. The longer he lets it go on, O'Malley gets to find his rhythm. O'Malley gets to figure out the reach. Vera gets put behind. Vera has a longer way to go to win this fight, I feel, than O'Malley does. So in the end, that's UFC 299, and I still think it's a really good card. From top to bottom, you have really interesting fights. You have interesting newcomers that I think could do things in the division. You have Michael Venom Paige debuting, someone I've never really watched in Bellator, but I've heard good things about. I think you have to acknowledge... I think the early prelims themselves pose some interesting questions. You have fighters, I don't want to say fighting for their contract, but fighting to get re-signed, I feel, is a fair comparison. And I think you really have to go through this card and look at the stakes that each fight has and look at the possibilities that each fight does. And you have a super interesting card top to bottom. But as a whole, that was UFC 299. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, do whatever you want. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you agree. Tell me what you disagree. In the end, this has been State of the Division. Have a good fight.